Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Villanova Basketball Report here on BLS. Bob Long, Tom Trainer, so excited to be with you for what's really a new undertaking for us, and we're excited about it, Tom. Obviously, for those who have been watching for the last, really, 13, 14 weeks, we've been talking Penn State football every week at just about this time, but now we're transitioning to Villanova basketball. It was always part of the plan, no matter what it may appear from an optical perspective. Yes, Villanova, now the number one team in the country, but this was all part of the plan. But again, couldn't think of a better time to start this show, couldn't think of a better person to start it with. And of course, we'll have Kevin Long coming on, being our third partner in crime here in next week's show. But Tom, so much to talk about tonight because this Villanova team has risen the ranks once again to the top, jumping Michigan State. It's the only team that was in front of them last week that didn't lose, but they do have one loss in the L column, so that's a big reason that Villanova jumped ahead. Another big reason, a huge win against Gonzaga.
The Cats are off to a great start. Great to be here doing this show. It's a great time of the year, the most wonderful time of the year. Christmas lights are up. Everybody's in the holiday spirit. Basketball families, as you know, it's the time of the year where you're going from gym to gym to gym, game after game, and it is a really, really fun time of the year. Great to have the Cats, number one in the country, and happy to be here, Bob. Excited to talk some Nova basketball.
Number one in the country and also going for their fifth consecutive Big Five championship, and they will play Temple Owls tomorrow night at the Liacouras Center, which is just a great venue for basketball in Philadelphia. Really, you have a bunch of very, very good venues across the city with a combination of some of that new charm with also the old greatness where you feel like you're walking the hallowed halls. Of course, the Palestra comes to mind first. Even Hawk Hill, now Hagan Arena at St. Joe's, they did a great job renovating that place while maintaining that atmosphere that had always been there. Temple really kind of took the bull by the horns, built what is now just a beautiful venue. I think there's a lot of people down Lancaster Avenue that kind of wish that Villanova had some sort of equivalent to the Liacouras Center. It'll be a great atmosphere tomorrow. I don't know if it'll be completely sold out, but it will be loud. You can jump, really jam a lot of people in that building, and that place will be jumping tomorrow.
Oh, it'll be sold out for sure.
Think so?
Yes, it'll be sold out. It's Villanova at Temple. This is the third straight year Temple is playing Villanova, ranked as the number one team in the country. I was there in 2016, and that place was rocking. I mean, let's be honest, Temple does not like Villanova, and with good reason. Villanova's been the team to beat in the Big Five. It's kind of like the New England Patriots in football, the New York Yankees in baseball, something to that effect in the Philadelphia basketball area, where when you're on top having a good run, people just don't like you. So this is a huge game for Temple. They were the last team to have beaten Villanova in the Big Five, and they want to be the team to end the streak for sure. And their fans really want to end the streak as well. And you said at the Liacouras Center, a beautiful arena. I remember going there as a little kid. It was really one of my first introductions to college basketball. When I was growing up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Quincy Watley, if anybody remembers a great Temple star back in late 90s, early 2000s on their Elite Eight team. And for John Chaney, and we were good family friends. St. Francis of Assisi Parish with him and his family in Harrisburg, and so we used to caravan in a bus down to Liacouras Center, a couple times a year with his family and a few people from our church to watch Quincy Watley and the Owls play. And the Liacouras Center and the Palestra coming down for the Old City 6 triple headers. Those were my first introductions to college basketball. So the Liacouras Center and the Big Five, near and dear to my heart, and it's going to be quite an atmosphere tomorrow night.
And I think this is as good a time as any to give a by way of introduction. Tom is an undergraduate from Villanova, also is now completing his graduate degree. He ran for 4 years, 5 years for the track team.
5 years, yes.
5 years for the Villanova track and field program between cross-country, indoor track, and outdoor track. So with all that Villanova pedigree, and I know the story already, but for the good folks out there, you're telling me that you were a Temple fan first.
Yeah. If I'm going to be honest, yes, that is the truth. Yeah. I was a Temple Owl fan when I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old until my family moved to the mainline area. And I've been a Villanova fan ever since. And, I remember coming to, when I was about 8 years old, I guess, coming to see Villanova play Seton Hall at the Pavilion back in the Steve Lapis days. And It was a great time. Went out to the old Villanova diner, and after the game, and the team was in the diner, and got a few autographs on a poster. Villanova fan ever since.
There you go. That's great. Well, that's great, and it's great to have you on because, as you know, and you've been part of some of these as well, we've been covering the Cats for, probably going on 6-7 years here in an official capacity. You even joined us up at the Prudential Center twice for a pregame radio show that we've been doing for a few years there. Now transitioning to covering the games and doing video reports after the game as well, some quick hits. So stay tuned for that all year on the website. But let's take now a step back to what was a great week in Villanova basketball. A win over Gonzaga, 88-72 in the Garden, part of an old-school doubleheader where all but one of those teams, that team being Gonzaga, in that doubleheader were former or current Big East teams. Villanova against Gonzaga out west, and then Syracuse against UConn in two of the best programs and the most historic programs in the history of the great conference that is the Big East. Villanova, my thought is that it was probably one of the best dissections of that Gonzaga team that we've seen in years, a team that came within a possession of winning the national championship last year. Yes, they lost some guys, but a great program under Mark Few, and their biggest loss in a very, very long time. Villanova was clinical in the way it went to work, spaced the floor, and its ability to get out on the break in transition and finish at the bucket is a thing of beauty. You saw some of those same traits come out during the La Salle game this past weekend, in a game where the half-court offense was not as sharp as I think Jay Wright would like it to be. And we'll talk about that game because you have to give La Salle a lot of credit for that. But it wasn't as sharp as it could be. And in that time, in those few instances where they go on a 2, 3, 4-minute sort of half-court offense scoreless streak, a lot of times it's transition basketball, causing the turnover and being able to space the floor, distribute the ball, and finish at the cup that's differentiated these teams. In really, there haven't been many close games, but when things have gotten tight, that's been the difference.
That's right, and that's one of the key facets of Villanova basketball, turnovers into points, getting out in transition. You look at the stats from the Gonzaga game, that's one of the numbers that jumps right out, is 19 turnovers for Gonzaga to Villanova's 12, and you can bet most of those turnovers Villanova was capitalizing, as you said, up and down the court all night long. And again, in the La Salle game, they were able to stop some of those La Salle runs. La Salle kept hanging in there, getting back in the game, but Villanova defense would always come up huge at a critical moment to create a turnover, get Dante or Mikhail or Jalen out in transition, and turn other teams' woes into gold for you.
And that La Salle game, one of the key players for that La Salle team is senior Amar Stukes, who was Philadelphia Catholic League native, of course, of La Salle College High School.
That's right.
You got the opportunity to call him throughout his college career. Great day for him, and we're seeing him really develop as a senior and develop that offensive game. You hear La Salle people really laud him for his ability to handle the basketball, avoid the turnover, because, as you know, that's been an issue for La Salle, even when they've had great teams. He's very, very good at that pure point guard, pass first type position. You talk to people, and it seems like maybe just the comfort level wasn't there. And none of them are in his head. But when it comes to, at times, deferring to some of the other seniors that were on the team, and there were some guys that like to jack it up in the last 3 or 4 years. He's now coming into his own, taking open looks, finding that corner three is a real sweet spot for him, and he had a great game and kept them in it.
He really did, and to be honest, his first couple years at La Salle, each time I saw him play Villanova, he looked a little flustered. He did look like an underclassman who was trying to figure it out on the court against, albeit, very, very good experienced Villanova teams who've been together for a while, a team that won a national championship. And, he looked a little uncomfortable. But on Saturday, he was stepping up to take shots and taking shots with confidence. He was 4 of 5 from beyond the arc. And whenever La Salle needed a big basket, he was there. And it's great to see. It's great to see, La Salle College High School product and Philadelphia Catholic League product stepping up on the big stage, and happy for him, for sure.
While we're talking about the Catholic League, you mentioned the Temple game, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. The Temple game that you were at in 2016, it was at Temple. It was a sold-out crowd, and Jalen just went off. I mean, that was of course, being the son of Rick Brunson, Temple great, to an extent he has a great NBA legacy even as well. And there was a thought that he was going to come to Temple, and there were rumors before he committed to Villanova that Fran Dunphy was going to bring Rick Brunson, and ended up doing so, if I believe correctly, onto the staff as an assistant. And that was going to be a big factor in Jalen Brunson making a decision. He decided to commit to Villanova, and I don't think he's looked back since, certainly. But on that same night, that very same night, I was down at the Palestra calling an old-school doubleheader, this time at the high school level, as Archbishop Carroll played number 1 seed Newman Goretti, and who went off but the big man who now sits on the Villanova bench and comes off and plays some decent minutes, Demir Cosby-Roundtree. So really, the Philadelphia cycle does come full circle. Of course, Mikal Bridges, Great Valley High School local as well. So Villanova, La Salle, Temple, you're going to hear guys that are Philadelphia names through and through. And that's a great thing. That's a healthy cycle.
It is. I mean, you've had Ryan Archidiacono. You've had
Kyle Lowry.
I was about to say all the way back to Kyle Lowry, back to Shane Clark. So Villanova's done a really good job of Darryl Reynolds. That's right, Darryl Reynolds. Villanova's done a really good job of keeping kids close to home from the Philadelphia area.
Chef went to Westtown.
Competing with La Salle, Temple, St. Joe's. That's always been their bread and butter. Getting those Philly guys, and it's nice to see Villanova's become a national program. But still sticking to their roots and getting quality guys out of the Philadelphia area. It's great to see.
One of the Philadelphia guys that we want to talk about is Mikal Bridges. Has a wingspan longer than this set, and is just an unbelievable player coming into his own. Right, he has that prototypical NBA body time. Actually, there's nothing typical about it, but it's ideal. It's what the scouts want. And he's developing what I believe is a very clean three-point shot. There's just not a lot of extra movement, kind of flicking that ball. And then he's just dominating in transition. But if I may, it's time to give Dr. John Giannini credit for bringing in some really good athletes to La Salle. And one came via transfer. His name, B.J. Johnson. Probably had the best game for La Salle, went over the 20-point mark in that game. And I thought was the toughest physical and athletic matchup for Mikal Bridges that he's seen all year, which is saying a lot. Going to the Bahamas, playing Tennessee, going to New York and playing Gonzaga. The fact that B.J. Johnson was that, I think, the toughest matchup he had to face is another pat on the back for this La Salle team that gave Villanova a very tough matchup on Sunday at the Wells Fargo Center.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. I believe B.J. Johnson is averaging 20-plus points per game. I mean, he's a stud.
Having a great year.
He's having a phenomenal year. That La Salle team
gave Villanova trouble last year, both B.J. and the La Salle Explorers as a whole.
Played him close last year as well. And that La Salle team, you're watching that game on Sunday, and La Salle looked phenomenal. You're saying this team has so much talent, to compete in Atlantic 10 Conference, and then you look at their schedule and you just wonder, how they dropped so many games. I don't know if it's
Drexel
losing to Drexel. I don't know if it's lapses of focus, confidence, what it is, but they have the talent is there. Like you said, John Giannini bringing in the talent at La Salle, and that was on display on Sunday for sure. And watching that game on Sunday at the half, down one, correct? Down the Explorers up one.
That's right.
And I'm sitting there and thinking, Villanova's, as you alluded to earlier, the half court sets could have been a little bit better, could have been a little bit more efficient. But I was sitting there thinking, Villanova really didn't shoot themselves in the foot, or wasn't anything they did wrong as much as it was La Salle was just playing really well and looked really good. And hey, if there was going to be an upset on Sunday, La Salle looked the part for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Once again, Villanova Basketball Report here on BLS. Bob Long, Tom Trainer. We have Kevin Long in the bullpen, both figuratively and literally. And now it's time for you folks to get involved. A little roll call here. For those of you watching out there, any thoughts, comments on Villanova or otherwise? We got people enjoying Christmas. We got Andrew McGinnis enjoying Seamus, who made the comment about Christmas. All good things, guys. Don't get me wrong. But to the extent you want to talk about Villanova basketball, let's get into it. I know Seamus probably has some thoughts, a lifelong St. Joe's Hawks fan. So in terms of 5 for 5 in the Big East, maybe that doesn't sit too well with him. Does that make him a Temple fan tomorrow? That's a tough question.
Maybe. I mean, St. Joe's just put up a good fight against Temple. Almost came back and stole one from the Owls this past week. But, yeah, I would say if you're a Big 5 fan, from another school, you're cheering for the Owls. I mean, like I said earlier, it's fair when you're the team that's doing so well for so long. You bring it upon yourselves, and that comes with the territory for sure. Other teams aren't gonna like you. Mm-hmm. They're not gonna like the same team beating you year after year after year. Especially as we said earlier, schools with a lot of kids from the Philadelphia area, programs, kids who have played together before in high school and AAU ball. These kids know each other in the playground during the summers. These kids know each other. They're very familiar. I mean, if you're a Division I athlete, you don't like losing in general, especially to, your childhood friends, rivals, whatever, year after year. You don't like that. So I think every other team and fan base, they're Temple Owls tomorrow for sure.
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree with that. And there's recruiting battles that go on. You mentioned a little bit about that rivalry amongst the kids themselves. I mean, Daniel Ochefu had a tough decision to make between Temple and Villanova, and he chose Villanova. And that's one that Temple fans look back and say, man, that would have been a good get. And then you look at Jalen Brunson, of course. And now he's a first-team preseason All-American, and he torched Temple 2 years ago. Last year, wasn't quite the same, but Villanova was able to come out with a win. So, Tom, keys to this game tomorrow, because Temple is a very tough team, as we said. They played La Salle close. St. Joe's played them very close. They beat a Wisconsin team that's scuffling, but it's still a Wisconsin team that has a lot of talent, has a player back in Ethan Happ that is going to be in that mix for some form of first, second, third team All-American, and he's a tough matchup. So what are your thoughts on the game tomorrow based on what Temple has showed you so far?
Well, for me, I think it plays into Villanova's hands, which is it's going to be a game that's, I think won and lost in the backcourt. I mean, Temple, you look down their roster and immediately what jumps out is you have Shiz Austin Jr. and Quentin Rose both averaging 17.3 points per game. I mean, that's a two-headed dragon if I've ever seen one in the backcourt. I mean, those guys are playing phenomenally well, having great seasons, and they're both young guys who have really come into their own this year. Shiz Austin, a junior out of the Haverford School, which we were at the Haverford School this weekend for their beginning of the season basketball tournament. A great program at the Haverford School. So he's a great player in the backcourt. And Quentin Rose, just a sophomore out of Rochester, New York. Shout out to my boy Rob Hurlbut in Rochester, The Rock.
That's right.
But those two guys.
He's our upstate New York high school basketball correspondent.
There you go. Yeah. If we ever need a correspondent from McQuaid Hoops, he's the guy. Those are the guys you have to stop first and foremost. And like I said, Villanova has always been a stalwart. In the backcourt, that's their bread and butter. So I mean, I think defensively, stopping those guys. But what's going to be key, and what I've noticed early in the season, it hurts losing a guy like Josh Hart. The past couple years, losing guys like Daniel, Arch, Darrell Reynolds on the defensive end. Chris Jenkins even became a pretty solid defensive player at the end of his career. And I've noticed early in the season, you could see it the very first game against Columbia, that just one-on-one off the dribble, guys were getting beat. And that causes all kinds of problems. Whether the defense collapses in, leaves guys open for shots. That's what we saw against La Salle. Stukes wide open in the corner all day if he wanted it. And that's kind of been Villanova's. If there's been one kryptonite for Villanova, sorry if I'm making an overarching claim too early in the season, but if there's one kryptonite I've noticed
overarching Diacono claim
for Villanova in the past few years, it's been that when you play teams that have guys who play really well one-on-one and can break defenders down, play good, I would say NBA-style offense. Like La Salle did the other day. They were putting on a high pick-and-roll clinic all day on Sunday. And that's NBA-style basketball. Pick-and-roll, one-on-one, and Temple's going to do that. Temple has the athletes. They have the ball handlers to do it. They have, Austin and Rose. So those guys are the ones you have to stop first and foremost. And, I mean, it's going to be a tough task. I mean, it's early in the year. That's just one of the things that the Cats will work on. I mean, it's a season in progress. It's a long year. And I mean, they're ranked number 1 in the country, even with all those issues, and still causing teams to commit a lot of turnovers every game and transitioning into points. Still one of the best defensive units in the country. Ranked number 1 in KenPom efficiency ratings. So I mean, for me to say that there is a glaring flaw, which I don't think it's glaring, it's one minor flaw. And they're still ranked number 1 in the country. Again, another November undefeated. So I'm not saying, it's a red flag, anything you need to be too worried about. I'm just saying that's a key to look, to take care of as we go to this game tomorrow night. And like we said, Villanova's been off to a great start. As I think one of the main keys is, Villanova being really, really tight on the defensive end, really disciplined, and guys are going to have to step up. Guys like Mikhail, he's a great on-ball defender. Just guys are going to have to really step up against Temple's really good athletes.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. Once again, Villanova Basketball Report here. Bob Long, Tom Trainer, excited to be here for what is the first of many great shows. And like I said, we have our third partner here, Kevin Long, who will be along with us next week. But, Tom, we have now, it's time, and we'll have the graphics and all the hieroglyphics and everything else ready to introduce our next segment. Mm-hmm. But without all that music, let us know and let the folks know what we're going to be doing, pitting Bob Long against Kevin Long.
There we go, a little brotherly rivalry. We're talking right now about a brotherly love rivalry, and in the city of brotherly love between Temple and Villanova. And we on our show are going to have a brother rivalry between the Long Boys. So each week, I should say, we're going to have Bob and Kevin picking 3 games. 3 games, the top 25, whichever marquee matchups. It could be I don't know, a MAC conference game, an Ivy League game, whatever it is, a game that they think's interesting, that they're really confident in picking either the favorite or the underdog. And how it's going to work is you pick an underdog if they're an underdog by 5 points. Mm-hmm. If they beat the spread and they lose by only 2 points, you get 3 points for that game. If your underdog wins the game, you get however many games they beat the spread by plus an additional 10 points. Conversely, if you pick a favorite and they cover the spread, you get however many points. You get however many points they cover the spread by.
Okay.
If they lose the game outright, it's a minus 10 points. And the same thing goes. If your team doesn't cover the spread, you get minus however many points it didn't. You get where this is going. So anyway.
Prizes/punishments.
Prizes/punishments. We will be having a surprise announcement of the punishment at the start of the new year, our first New Year's show, so that's something to look forward to. We've had similar punishments or prizes on Bob Long Sports in the past, whether it is singing a silly song, doing something goofy, something.
Now it's on video.
Utter embarrassment. That'll just make it that much better now that it's on video. So
good.
Happy that it's those guys competing and not me. I'll just be officiating. But yeah, we're excited to be doing that.
All
just
right.
Something fun, mix it up, and
there's some great games this week to get into.
There are some great games this week. Some very intriguing matchups. Speaking of old rivalries, and I think one game that we are going to be touching on, we had Syracuse and UConn playing last week in the Garden, and speaking of Syracuse and old rivalries, I think that's a game that both you and Kevin have in mind, but not to steal your thunder. How about, do you want to start it off, Bob, and tell us what 3 games? Oh, and one last caveat. Each week you have to pick one Big East game. So one Big East game, then 2 other games.
All right.
Doesn't matter.
Well, I'm going to throw 2 on here for you. And there's some.
What do you got?
There's some great ones. Mississippi State at Cincinnati, Michigan at Texas. Miami at GW, which George Washington's down this year. You saw Penn State just completely annihilate GW, and it just hasn't been the same there. But they will face a familiar foe in that Jim Larinaga used to coach at George Mason. Now, all that to say, I'm not picking that game. I'm actually taking. You gave me Villanova at Temple, Villanova -7.
Yes.
So I'm going to go Villanova there. I think Villanova is going to win by more than that. That line is already pushed up a point to a point and a half. That tells me that I think the Cats are going to be big favorites, and I think that the way they played against La Salle I think that's going to be in part that they're going to come out a lot more fresh. But I don't necessarily see myself collecting a ton of points there. I could see that a 5, 6, 7 point in addition, maybe a 15-point win, a 13-point win.
So that's your Big East game. For the
that's my Big
All
East.
Right.
Now,
there were some other interesting Big East games, especially coming up this weekend, that you could have gone for.
That's true. I could have. Now, Syracuse-Georgetown is too good to pass up. And the reason I say that, Tom, is because you gave us. Now we don't have spreads out on games that are more than 2 days out.
Right, that's the tough thing about college basketball.
So we're going to have to guess what the spreads will be. But based on what you gave me, Georgetown is favored or will be favored based on the probability. So
let me just explain for our listeners. So as you mentioned, Bob, it's difficult with college basketball. So in college football shows, like on their game day show, where they have a similar contest for all of their hosts on the show. They're picking games, one game every week, and on that Saturday they already have the spread, the line for the game. Whereas college basketball, teams are usually playing 2 games per week, so we're picking each week just like they would for college football. However, you typically don't have a spread for games 2 days, sometimes not until the day of or day before of 2 days before a game.
Which makes this tough.
It makes it really tough. Hey, but it makes it that much more exciting, I think.
Sure.
And so what you're working with is, ESPN, with Nate Silver and their stats guys, they have, win probabilities, which I'm sure all of you have seen. So kind of gauging off of that. So, what the information that we've given Bob and Kevin is, if a team is, if a team has a win probability of, say, 60%, 55% or more, I just gave them information. And they can look up the win probabilities for themselves and guesstimate how much a team is going to be favored by, guess what the line is going to be on the game. And then otherwise, if it's 50-ish%, that game's going to be about even. So they are certainly not playing with house money.
We're throwing darts in the dark.
Are you a good dart player, Bob?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Probably
Never played?
I don't know. So anyway, let me get I mean, I have played.
Okay.
Not in the darkness, but I got to be honest. I don't even think I'm going to have 10 points on the line here because while it says that Georgetown is, or you've said that it's might likely be favored, and you look at the win probability, Georgetown, for one, is undefeated. That's great. They could not possibly, if they tried, they could not possibly have scheduled a lighter non-conference. Okay. I mean, it is not physically possible to do.
Which answers my question, which is why you said that's great that they're undefeated so facetiously.
I mean, my goodness. I think Syracuse is going to win and going to win big. Okay. The issue is I don't think they're going to get I'm not going to get 10 points out of it because I think Syracuse is going to come out favored on the road there.
Okay.
Third one I'm going to pick is, so I'm actually going to pick 3 Big East games because I'm going to take Iona, the Gales, over St. John's, and I'm not going to necessarily take that outright. I don't have to make that choice, but if it happens, that helps me. I think St. John's is a good team. I think we're going to find out a little bit more of them once Big East play starts. Shamori Pons, Justin Simon, some of these guys are really, really solid basketball players. But Iona's going to put up points on you. And they are a team that is going to get out and run and test your ability to stay with them. They're also at half. They're into the second half now, but they were beating a pretty good Yale team tonight. So I think I like Iona. I just hope that line doesn't move too far against me in the next couple days.
Yeah, I mean, hey, and good on you for sticking just in the Big East. So good for you, a homer. There you go, commitment. Doing it for the league. That's right.
Do it for the Vine.
Which I've never seen that show, by the way. The League, is that a good show?
It's entertaining.
Okay, all right.
A little crude, but it's funny.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I enjoyed it for the relatively few episodes I watched.
Okay, gotcha. So those are your picks. So you got Syracuse, Georgetown. So you're picking Syracuse, assuming they're going to be the underdog, maybe. But either way,
I mean, I gotta
Syracuse.
lock the picks in tonight.
Right, so you're locking, but either way, you're taking Syracuse, and then you're taking Iona over St. John's. And you're taking
hoping it goes out right.
Yes, and there you go. And you're taking the Cats to cover the spread against the Temple Owls. All right. Well,
and you're reporting on Kevin, right?
Without further ado, I have Kev's picks. So we might need to change the rules here a little bit, to not bore our listeners too much, because the first 2 picks here are going to sound pretty familiar. So Kevin is also taking the Syracuse Orange over the Georgetown Hoyas. And then he is also taking our Villanova Wildcats over the Temple Owls to cover that.
Yep.
It's currently 7.5 spread tomorrow night. Where you guys differ, Kevin is taking in the battle for the state of Indiana, outside of Butler and Purdue, who are also playing this week. Battle for the state of Indiana. He is taking the Indiana Hoosiers.
Yeah,
to
I looked
beat
at
the
that
spread
game.
against Notre Dame
I
Fighting
love
Irish.
it. I love the pick.
Yep. So I guess that's the only game. So your Iona St. John's game,
Yep.
and his Indiana Notre Dame game. That's going to be the difference in week 1. So how do you
All
feel
right.
about your chances coming out on top the first week?
I feel okay about it.
If so you said you looked at the Notre Dame Indiana game.
I would have gone Indiana. I think it's a good
Okay.
pick. Yeah,
Gotcha.
I do. It's a good Notre Dame team. Don't get me wrong. A lot of experience on that team. Matt Farrell you have on that team. Of course, Bonzi Colson. Rex Pfluger continues to step into his role. I really like this Notre Dame team. Of course, Ball State, when they come into the Joyce Center and beat Notre Dame, you ask a few questions. But that's a game where Notre Dame's clearly going to be favored, and a game should be close, right? It's a neutral site. Butler, Purdue, and Indiana, Notre Dame.
Yes.
I think it's a double header at Bankers Life Fieldhouse.
I believe so.
Is that still the name out there in Indianapolis?
I think so.
Bankers Life.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's always a great weekend out there. I think that game has a good shot to be close.
Were there any other games that caught your eye that you thought about making a guess on, or were they all too
Not
close to
necessarily,
call?
but let's take a look at some of these, right? And then we can just go through some of these games.
Well, one game that many people might not have looked at that's been close, at least for majority of the game when they've played in the past, and is always in Detroit, is Michigan State Oakland, which is a small rivalry in the state of Michigan. But Oakland's been known to play Michigan State close at times. Then Sparty usually
Right.
put some distance on them in the end. But that's an intriguing one if you were looking for Oakland to beat the spread. That was a game you could have looked at. There's some really good matchups this week. You have Virginia Tech at Kentucky. That's a good one.
Yeah, actually, I thought about that one because you have this listed as even.
Yes,
And
about even. I mean, as far as you can tell at this point, yep.
I mean, I think Kentucky rolls, to be quite
Right.
frank with you. I mean, they have not found themselves quite yet. Once again, it's a young nucleus. A lot of the guys left for the NBA last year. John Calipari, sees it as a season-long process to get that team ready for March, and by and large, he's done a great job. I think they roll. Virginia Tech very much improved. Buzz Williams has done such a good job down there. He's brought in some transfers, and that's what he used to do at Marquette as well. When you look back at that move, Buzz Williams, one of the guys that was an up-and-coming coach in the Big East. He replaced Tom Crean at Marquette. Really had never played the game at a high level, but was a guy that got that fan base going. When he leaves for Virginia Tech, maybe the 15th best job, quote-unquote, in the ACC, you're thinking, why did he do that? Listen, he came to a program where he has a lot of connections in that Northern Virginia area in terms of getting transfers and the JUCO market out there. The other thing is, and the folks at the Big East may not want to hear this, and maybe it's not even valid or warranted at this point, but when he saw what was going on sort of at the back end of that conference realignment, if he thought that the ACC was a more viable conference going forward, maybe he makes that move there. Of course, there's 100 other things it could have been. It could have been just he maybe didn't see the commitment. A very Edgechellis-like moving from Penn State to Navy. It could have been any of those things, but it's worth having a discussion about.
Yeah, and I want to bring up, if you will, if you'll allow it, bring up a counterfactual, which is if Buzz Williams stays on at Marquette, because you and I have talked about this at length before about the disappointment that Georgetown and Marquette have been so far for holding the mantle of as great as it is for the old Big East teams that are still in the Big East Conference, as great as it is that Villanova has been winning year after year after year, they've won all of the regular season championships in the new Big East so far. It's been disappointing that outside of the first year when Villanova lost at Georgetown, and then obviously last year lost at Marquette. But they've never been a factor in terms of regular season championship race. And you would have expected going into
How many Marquette teams really competed for Big East titles though, even when Buzz was there? They were that
Right.
fourth, fifth team, and they did
Right, and
make
they
the
would have been,
tournament. Back end, they made the tournament last year, right?
Right. And what year did he start? I don't know if you know this at the top of your head. What year did he start at
I
Marquette?
don't know.
So how many years was he? So how many years was he after D Wade and co? I mean, what, 5 years, 6 years?
Well, I'm trying to think more. I'm trying to back end it when was Kelvin Sampson fired from Indiana, and I'm thinking late 2000s.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay.
Sort of like 07, 08.
Oh, where's our stat guy when you need him?
Yeah.
Okay, Kevin, hey. But what I'm saying is all right. Yeah, all right. So I hear what you're saying about when was Marquette ever a factor in the old Big East. But what you would have expected was that, just like Villanova has, they saw an opportunity. So you have this new conference forming. There's a vacuum all of a sudden. You no longer have UConn, Syracuse, Pitt, Notre Dame, Louisville. All of a sudden, the top is almost up for grabs.
Right.
And there's an opportunity, and I think Villanova was very smart. I mean, I don't know how much they might disagree with me and say, the coaching staff might say, oh, well, we've kept the same approach, nothing changed. But I have a hard time believing that you wouldn't at least, have the idea to say, hey, here's a great opportunity we have to become the team to beat in the league. It's a new conference, kind of starting over fresh, new teams coming in. Let's make our mark and make our mark early. Obviously, you'd say, oh, well, we tried our best to have, get the best recruits, get the same team culture, do our best every year. No year's different from a year prior. But I would argue that's a little bit different. So what I'm saying,
it's great, but what specific actions are you talking about?
Well, it's the culture in your program. So it's getting your guys to buy in, to say, hey, look, this is a new opportunity. Here, I'll use my own experience. So Villanova track and field. They hadn't won a Big East track and field championship for a number of years before I got there. I was on the team from 2011 through 2016, and Mark O'Sullivan, our great coach and legend over at Villanova, he brought.
Who's watching this evening?
I hope so. Who hey, he's at a lot of the Villanova basketball games. He might. He told us, we had a team meeting. He brought everybody together and he said, hey, look, guys, because the powers in the conference had been UConn, Pitt, Notre Dame, and track and field. And he said, hey, this is an opportunity. They saw, where they could get points. In track and field, it's a little bit different, so they actively went out and, recruited, more heavily in field event areas where they might not have before, or, the sprints, other areas where we were weaker, and said, hey, this is our opportunity for us to, we had a bunch of years of finishing third, fourth, we were just trying to get a trophy or finish podium, and now all of a sudden it's an opportunity for us to come together as a track and field team to kind of shift, our frame of mind a little bit and say, hey, we can become the team in the Big East Conference. And 2 years straight, we won the Triple Crown, which is cross country, indoor track, outdoor track. So what I'm saying is it's and culture is important, which brings me to my question about Buzz Williams. We've gone way off in a tangent. My original question, counterfactual, about Marquette. So what I'm saying is it's been disappointing that I would have expected Marquette and Georgetown to have been, battling it out with Villanova for the past 4 years for Big East Conference titles. They've been, the doormats of the Big East. Well, Marquette's made the tournament. They've been all right, but Georgetown has largely been a doormat in the past few years. So I'm just wondering, so back to my question, do you think things are different at Marquette? Now, Wojo, I think he's a great coach. He comes from Coach K stock. I would think clearly he knows what he's doing, but do you think it's different if Buzz Williams is there?
I don't know. I mean, would it be different if he was there?
And counterfactuals are always
I think he's a
hard.
better coach, if that's what you're asking me. I think he's I'm not. I see what you're saying. I don't know how to really answer what you're saying. I think
Yeah.
John Thompson III is just a horrifically bad head coach who happened to be a decent recruiter. So whether he was in the new Big East, the old Big East, or the MAC, I think he would have struggled. I think Providence and
didn't-
Seton Hall, on the other hand,
Okay.
Providence brings in a guy that coached at Fairfield. And then listen, everybody comes from somewhere, but I think Ed Cooley has done a good job of going into the Northeast where formerly kids might have gone to UConn and said, listen, UConn is in the American Athletic Conference. Do you want to play there or do you want to play in the Big East where you're going to have more games on national TV than they are? Oh, by the way, you're probably going to have more games truly on national TV than most middle-of-the-road ACC programs, Big 12 programs, because all those games are shared on ESPN. Some of them are on ESPN3 or a regional network. The ESPN carries the game, yes, but there's only so many ESPNs and ESPN2s. Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports 2 are national television outlets. And oh, by the way, there's a contract that the Big East has to have at least 100 games each year on a television network. So I think, Providence, Seton Hall going into that New England as well as down to the Mid-Atlantic area and competing a lot better than they were in the past. And Pitt came into Philadelphia. Syracuse continues to come into Philadelphia, don't get me wrong. But I think there's more opportunity for those programs to get better players. And then also, there's just not the gauntlet of going to Louisville, of going to Syracuse, of going to Pittsburgh. So you can not get away with it per se, but you're going to come out, I think, looking better than going through a slugfest of the old Big East or the current ACC schedule. So I think there was an opportunity.
You're saying that makes
Syracuse, I'm sorry.
that's made Providence and Seton Hall's better.
100%.
Right. Okay.
100%.
I understand that.
So do I think Buzz is a better coach than Woj? I think he's a better recruiter than Woj. I think he has a better sense of the JUCO market. Can you remind me the big guy? Left after 1 year from Marquette.
Recently?
Yeah. And I'm just blanking on it for some reason, but that hurts too, right? When you look at teams like this that lose guys early, Villanova back when Scotty Reynolds came in after Kyle Lowry left, they got lucky because Kelvin Sampson had just gotten fired from Oklahoma, and Scotty needed a home. And at that point, it was right after Kyle Lowry had declared for the NFL or the NBA draft. So, with a program like Villanova, a program like Marquette, when they have players that leave, and listen, this guy was expected to leave after year one, but, when you have guys that leave a little bit earlier than you might expect, it's not as easy to backfill because you're counting on that position for 4 years, and maybe you're not recruiting to that specific spot. With the expectation he stays. Best example I can give you there, Steven Adams at the University of Pittsburgh. Has a meteoric rise in his sophomore year, leaves, then there's nobody in the front court. The recruiting didn't follow suit. The best recruiter for the University of Pittsburgh went and joined Jalen Calipari's staff at Kentucky, and that was kind of the beginning of the end of Jamie Dixon.
So you're saying Marquette's been recruiting too well? That they're losing, that they don't create that fabric, they don't have time to create that culture?
That was kind of one guy.
Okay, and that was Henry Ellenson, by the way.
Thank you. No, I'm talking more about the fact that that's more a general statement, and that when we talk about Buzz, his go-to is certainly recruiting the best players he can out of high school, but totally understanding and being essentially in bed with the JUCO market. And also he's done a great job with transfers at Virginia Tech as well.
Okay. So you're saying that the difference is if Buzz was to bring in a Henry Ellenson, player like that who leaves, he has better connections to fill that void.
Yes.
More quickly rather than through recruiting. I see what you're saying. But okay, well, even still, maybe it is. Yes, maybe it was too difficult of a question to ask. If it would be things would have been different. However, is it not fair to say that Marquette and Georgetown have been a disappointment? So I understand it makes complete sense. I don't think anybody would disagree, and I think a lot of people saw this coming, that the new Big East created an opportunity for teams like Providence, Seton Hall, St. John's to be more competitive. Of course they're going to be more competitive in the new Big East. okay, if they can be more competitive in the new Big East, why can't teams like Marquette and Georgetown that have already been competitive continue to do so? And why have teams like Providence and Seton Hall surpassed them? And new teams to the Big East, Xavier, Creighton's, Butler, come into a brand new league and pushed Georgetown and Marquette around. That makes no sense to me. And in my mind, the Big East, and I'm saying this because I want Georgetown and Marquette to be doing better.
Georgetown's coach was a joke. I mean,
Okay.
I think
so you're blaming it all on John Thompson III.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, he actually brought in some good athletes, and then he tried to put them in an offensive system that was not conducive. Nobody wants to play a system like that.
However, they did well in the old Big East. Did they not continually? Consistently compete for Big East regular season championships, make deep runs in the Big East tournament, make it to the Elite Eight several times. Yes, they also had their share of Villanova's current problem of slipping up early in the tournament for sure.
Yeah,
but were they not much more successful in the old, arguably much tougher Big East than the current Big East?
Yeah, they were.
And therefore, it's been a disappointment and I'm saying this because I want Marquette and Georgetown to be doing better. And we could get into the same conversation with the Big Five. You want your competitors to be doing better year after year because that makes your games against them better, more competitive, your league more competitive, tougher tests. Because what we're all preparing for, everybody's preparing for March. Unfortunately, Jay Wright says it every year. They talk about the process of the season, right? But unfortunately, every season you are judged by one thing and one thing only, and that is how you do in the month of March. And playing teams with better teams, better competition, more competitive league makes your team tougher, makes your team battle ready, prepared for March. So I'm saying that it's been unfortunate that teams that you would have expected to carry the torch, the mantle for the new Big East along with Villanova have not.
Yeah, I'm just having a little trouble, and I understand the point. I'm having a little bit of trouble, though, because, the Big East has done very well in terms of RPI, in terms of getting teams into the tournament from a absolute perspective as well as from a percentage perspective. Yeah. And generally, teams have done okay in the tournament. Okay to good.
You're right, and you're right. You could even argue that the Big East has surpassed all expectations.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
people left.
That's Georgetown's problem.
People left the conference, left for dead, right?
Right.
And here they are, sending, looking to send about 7 teams in a 10-team conference per year, and people talking about programs like UConn would love to be back in the Big East, and plenty of other programs would love to get in the Big East Conference.
And that's kind of what I'm saying. You look at it holistically, and I see what you're saying, but listen, that's Georgetown's problem.
Right.
They held on to
Fair enough.
To a coach for way too long because he happens to be the son of a legend. I mean, that's their fault. And then they brought in Patrick Ewing because they think that he's going to be the magic fix-it, even though John Thompson's son wasn't. I mean, that's their fault.
That's
he hasn't
too early to
failed
tell.
Yet. He hasn't failed.
I mean, there are 8 games in the season. They're 8-0. Haven't played anybody.
I have an issue. I just have an issue at times, like when the University of Michigan brings in Brady Hoke because Rich Rodriguez was a failure, and everybody comes to the conclusion that it was an issue only because he didn't go to Michigan, and that's blindly and too simply stating it. But so you bring in this average coach from San Diego State. And you expect that to be the reason that things turn around. Now, the fact that Jim Harbaugh was on the market at the right time was an absolute stroke of luck. And perhaps we're talking about the same thing 3 or 4 years down the line for Georgetown. But from what I understand, that search was not all that exhaustive. They reach out to Patrick Ewing. He's an assistant in the NBA. It works out. He wants to come back, and they hire him. But listen, they just held on to a coach for probably 5 years too long, because his father was sitting courtside doing radio for the amount of time that his son was coaching that team. So when I look at George, and I do mean this with all due respect, because John Thompson Jr. was a phenomenal coach, and John Thompson III was a good recruiter. I just don't think he was the right guy for Georgetown. If it was anybody else, he would have been gone a lot earlier than that. So when we talk about them, not rising to the expectations of the Big East. Essentially, that's why I say that's their problem.
Fair enough.
It's good discussion,
Fair
though.
enough.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Good discussion. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we agree. I understand your point. I mean, for me, it would be better having the old Big East teams, Georgetown, Marquette, those old rivalries, doing well.
Is that an old rivalry, though? I mean, they
Georgetown,
joined,
not Marquette.
right? Yeah, I mean,
not
they
Marquette.
joined in 05, right?
Yeah. But I think we agree. You're right. Holistically, if you look at the Big East, is outperforming expectations, regardless of Georgetown and Marquette having their problems, which, as you said so eloquently, that's their problem. So.
But it's a great discussion, and it also leads me into another thought because our colleagues over at vuhoops.com do a great job, much more up on the day-to-day issues of the program than we are, of course. So give them a shout, give them a follow. They wrote an article about the Big Five. So the Big Five being Villanova, Temple, Penn, St. Joseph's, and La Salle, playing the 4-game round robin where you play 2 home, 2 road, and you crown a champion at the end of every year. You can crown co-champions if 2 teams are 3-1, et cetera, et cetera. But the Big Five has been dominated by Villanova. They've won the last 21 games and are 1 game away, as you see behind us, from going 5 for 5 in the Big Five championships in 2013 through 2016. And this being, 2017, 2018, we'll say. So that's 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17, and then this year. So there's thoughts there, and this cracks me up, that Villanova is lessening their schedule. It's essentially wasting their time playing these old school Big Five rivals. And since they haven't lost a game, there's a full crop of Villanova students that are freshmen right now, and even those that are still seniors, that haven't seen Villanova lose a Big Five game. Not that that is bad, but it could, and I believe has at times, engendered an attitude of apathy relative to those Big Five games. You can speak a lot more directly to that than I can as a former undergrad. But
yes. The answer is yes. There has been a lot of apathy for the Big Five games. I would say that's part of that has to do with where Villanova, kids are coming from. I mean, Villanova's a much more national university than these other, outside of Penn, than the other Big Five schools are. So, you have kids coming, from New England, from New York, from California, from, the South, from Chicago. Kids who are coming, from areas, frankly, that aren't even college, big college sports areas that are pro sports areas,
right.
first and foremost, and then coming to this area where, where they, when they know, if depending on how much they know about Villanova basketball before they get on campus, they know about the Big East, they know about their rivalries with Georgetown, their old rivalries with Syracuse, UConn, so on, their new Big East rivalries with Xavier, with Providence, Seton Hall, Creighton Butler, and like you said, as far as they know, even if you're a current senior, all you know has been, we play the same 4 teams every year just to chalk up another W in the win column. And
why can't you schedule more difficult teams?
Right.
Why
so
can't you do this?
Yeah, so unless you're a kid who's from the Philadelphia area who like myself and and yourself who grew up, knowing the Big Five. I grew up going to the triple header that they used to have down at the Palestra every year, Saturday every year, where you had the City Six back-to-back games, including Drexel. It was great, and a kid from the area who grew up who saw, Jameer Nelson, Delonte West, 2004 St. Joe's team go to the final, almost go to the Final Four. We're one shot away, and I say that because hey. And I sound so disappointed talking about that because, speaking to my point, I'm a Philadelphia guy. As much as I'm a Villanova guy, a Philadelphia guy, so I want the other Philadelphia teams to do well. But unless you're like us, you're a kid who's from the area, as far as you're saying St. Joe's who? Temple? I've heard of these schools, but it's not a game you're going to get up for. With that being said, however, I completely disagree with VU Hoops. Because, as we saw on Sunday,
Oh, I'm sorry. VU Hoops was addressing
the concerns. Oh, I'm
in the
sorry.
Villanova
I'm
community
sorry.
and
Yes,
said that it
yes.
needed to stay.
Right, that it needed to stay. Okay. Yes. So I'm sorry. Sorry, VU Hoops. I'm completely on board. Sincere apology. I have a sorry letter in the mail for you tomorrow. I am completely on board with what VU Hoops is saying. That these games, as you saw on Sunday, every year. So, whereas you're saying the argument would be you're looking at it as it's 4 games every year where there's 4 automatic wins against cupcakes that do nothing to prepare you for the Big East or for March. Why do it anymore? Why is it in the interest of Villanova? I point to a game like Sunday when you're playing a team like La Salle, that if you were playing a team the caliber of La Salle, who outside of the Big Five, I think that is a cupcake game. I think that's a game Villanova wins by 25, 30 points easily. But since it's La Salle, and if you were anybody who was at the game on Sunday, the La Salle fans were loud. That was part of the difference also having the game at the Wells Fargo Center this year as opposed to somewhere like the Pavilion where La Salle can have, 1,000, couple thousand fans there instead of almost nobody there. And it means a lot to these kids from these other schools. Like I said, kids that it might not mean much to the students at Villanova who aren't from the area or to college basketball fans around the country. But like we said earlier, it means a lot to these players on Villanova. They know the La Salle, Temple, Penn, St. Joe's kids. They've played against them in high school since they were kids. These rivalries, go back years and means a lot. And La Salle came and punched Villanova in the mouth on Sunday and gave them a really, really tough test. So to say that these games don't matter and say that they're 4 cupcake games every year, I look at it like you have automatically on your schedule 4 games that you don't have to worry. You don't have to have your AD or your coaching staff worried about going to schedule a quality non-conference opponent.
Mm-hmm.
You automatically have 4 games every year that you know are going to be solid games that you can't overlook at all. The other team's going to be coming to play, and I think it's great. And no, you can't get rid of the Big Five.
3 things. 1, completely agree with your point, but I'm going to address it a different way. 2, watch Villanova go lose to Temple tomorrow after all these people are saying this, after getting too overconfident after a 9-point win against La Salle. 3, let's just, because I agree with you and they're not walkovers, let's just say for a fact that they are walkovers. But here's why this is such a flawed argument. If you go back to 2004, Temple was the number 1 team in the country. They were on a steady rise moving up to that point and had a relatively brief stay at the top.
St. Joe's. Go back to when?
Oh, I'm sorry. Temple back in the late 90s.
Yes.
About 2000.
Yep.
That's what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Because even when St. Joe's was at their relatively short peak, they didn't blow out Villanova, that type of thing.
They did with Jameer Nelson?
It was a 7-point game, if I remember correctly, the year Jameer
I
and
thought the
crew.
one year, I'm
they
pretty
may have
sure
gone
they
to
beat
Hagan
Villanova.
Arena, but the year
I'll
they
look
came
it
to
up.
the Pavilion was very close.
Okay.
Well, relatively
well,
close.
I remember, if I remember correctly, they played them at the Palestra. Not to get off too much on a tangent here, but if I remember correctly, they played Villanova at the Palestra and won by about 40 points. I'll look it up.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, but and Temple back to when they were ranked number 1 in the country. What if they came in and said, you know what, we're better than these teams? Listen, the mistake is that people think that this is a point in time is the way things are going to be. And frankly, I think Villanova fans need at times a dosage of reality because they are, other than Gonzaga, the only small Catholic school that through this entire conference realignment process has remained at the top year after year after year. I mean, they are an anomaly in college basketball, and a big part is the guy standing on the bench, and that's Jay Wright, the head coach. Now, it's great that he never jumped for the NBA or the University of Kentucky job. It seems like if Coach K were to call it quits, I don't think he's moving. It seems like he's a lifetime Villanova coach at this point. At some point, that will end. The hope for Villanova fans is that both the Villanova program is set up to be a very desirable job at the level of, say, an Indiana and Arizona. I don't know that that's the case at this point, but they can continue to work towards that. The other hope is that the Big East continues to be very viable in terms of the revenue it brings in specifically for its basketball programs. I mean, you look at the overall contracts from a television perspective, which is where you get 60 to 70 to 80% of conference revenues that they then deliver to the schools. Most of those are bundled basketball and football. and a lot of that's not broken out. So you don't really know what ACC basketball programs are making. All you know is that the absolute number bundled is a lot bigger than that of the Big East. However, if the Big East can continue to be very viable, work its way through this television contract, get a lucrative new one, Villanova can continue to be in that driver's seat. But let's say it doesn't go exactly according to plan. Is Villanova going to be like this forever? What happens when they stop being ranked every year? Is that point, well, okay, 8 years from now, we'll go back and start playing Big Five games again? I think the point I've gotten across without going much further than that, but I see a little bit of arrogance there. And the way things are right now are not the way things will always be. And I don't just mean for Villanova. Temple's a very proud program. Mm-hmm. They replaced John Chaney with a very good coach in Fran Dunphy, and they'll get another good coach tomorrow if Fran decides to leave. Phil Martelli, I like him as a person, and some folks at St. Joe's, this isn't me calling for anybody's job, but at some point that may open up in the next 4 or 5 years, whatever time frame that may be. That's going to be a pretty decent job as well within the A-10. So when you say we don't want to play Big Five games anymore, one, Villanova went to the Bahamas and they went up to Madison Square Garden, and they had the opportunity to play the then number 2 team in the country, the then number 16 team in the country. It just didn't happen with Purdue and Arizona losing. They played Gonzaga. What were they, number 15 when they played them? A top 20
12.
team number 12. They got plenty. They have a good out-of-conference schedule, and the Big East is strong. Playing 4 games and honoring the tradition. And, oh, by the way, Villanova will lose one at some point. There's nothing wrong with that.
Maybe tomorrow.
Temple's feeling it.
Temple is a team that's picked, I believe, to finish anywhere between 5th and 7th in the American Athletic Conference coming into the year. And they're a team they're a bit of a puzzle, right? They have losses to La Salle, losses to George Washington, but then they have wins over Wisconsin. They have wins.
La Salle beat them?
I believe so. Let me double check.
I thought they hung on.
Yeah, they hung on against St. Joe's. They lost to La Salle, 87-83.
Okay. Oh, all right.
But they have wins over. So I believe down at the Charleston Classic. I believe Temple won the Charleston Classic. So they beat Auburn and Clemson.
It's a good win over Clemson.
Good win over South Carolina, I believe, up Madison Square Garden. And then
big win over Wisconsin was
good win over Wisconsin, an all right Wisconsin team sitting around 500, and then barely hung on to beat St. Joe's. But then they have those 2 head scratchers against GW and La Salle. They're
GW is so bad too.
So what I'm saying is they're a team that you don't know what you're going to get, but you know that they are going to be ready to play tomorrow night.
Yeah, that's also an early conference game. By the way, I'm sorry, it's not a conference game anymore. 8-10, wow.
Yep.
Wow, look at that. They couldn't get enough at GW when they were in the 8-10. They had to schedule them out of conference. Yeah.
But you have a Temple team, and for Temple, big picture here. Well, the biggest picture might be breaking Villanova's streak. But within this season, this is a game for Temple where you're looking at, Temple, they're sitting, I think, about 48th in the Ken Pom rankings, somewhere about there. A team with a solid RPI because they've played, high quality out of conference opponents earlier in the year from other big conferences. A team that's looking like, as of right now, they're probably going to finish more like, obviously haven't played any conference games yet, but it might, do better than expected in the American Athletic Conference, maybe finish 4th, somewhere around there. So what I'm saying is a team that's going to be on the bubble come March. And a game like this, they know, their coaching staff knows, and their players are very aware, as much as you want to beat Villanova because you want to end Villanova's streak and they're your crosstown rival and you're tired of losing to them, you also want to beat Villanova because this is a marquee win where you're sitting back in March and you've gone through a tough American Athletic Conference season, especially maybe one that hasn't gone exactly as planned, and you're on that cusp and you're sitting on Selection Sunday, but you've got that big win over a team that was ranked number 1 in the country, and a team that's going to, probably win another Big East regular season championship and be a high seed again. This looks great. So that's another big incentive for Temple tomorrow.
As you see on the poster board behind us here, Villanova won outright the last 4 years, looking for it to be the 5th. Now, clearly, if Temple were to win, they would still be co-champions, but with a 21-game win streak, I don't think Villanova has any interest in that. They want to be, once again, standalone champs in the Big Five. Tom, this was fun, man. We bleed past the 9 o'clock hour.
Yeah.
Big shout-out. We got some good viewership here tonight. A lot of people hopping in and a lot of people getting involved on the discussion, which we really appreciate. So, Tom, it's been fun. We'll have a third member to our team next week.
Looking forward to having Kevin back.
Having Kevin on the show. And we are going to go Tuesdays, it would appear. Tuesdays, 8 o'clock. So to the best we can, we'll be consistent with that. We'll get some great guests on as well. We have a lot of good contacts in and around the Philadelphia area up at the Big East that we will get to join our show and should be a lot of fun. So, Tom, I appreciate your time tonight. Good discussion. Really, really good stuff to get us started here.
It's been fun. Tomorrow night is going to be a lot of fun. I hope everybody enjoys watching that game. I do think the Cats pull it out. I think they're just the better team. But looking forward to it. This has been a blast. Looking forward to the rest of the season, the end of the non-conference schedule, and can't wait to get into Big East play, and happy to be here, Bob.
Enjoy that game live. I'll have to tape it and watch it later. Actually broadcasting a game for La Salle High School against Constitution High School in Philadelphia, and guess who is on that team? We'll leave the folks with this one.
Waiting for them to guess?
No, I'm not waiting for them to guess. A sophomore forward at 6'7". Tell me if this sounds familiar. Corey Bridges. Yes, Mikhail Bridges' younger brother. No, Mikhail will not be in attendance, unfortunately, at La Salle High School. He has a little bit of other business to attend to that evening. But I will give everybody a shout on Corey and let you know how he played next Tuesday night. You can catch that La Salle broadcast on BLS as well. And we'll also be out in Reading at Albright College on Friday night as La Salle takes on the reigning 6A champs, Reading. So that should be fun as well for those of you that like good, big-time high school basketball. But for Tom Trainer, I'm Bob Long saying so long here from our Philadelphia studios. Thanks again, everybody, for being in the mix tonight, and we'll talk to you soon.